And we're live. Hey, everybody. I am Julie Barrett, founder of Conservative Ladies of America, and we are doing an impromptu live this afternoon with my friend Eric Pratt on X. He is at Mistral Comet. And if you've watched our YouTube channel or on my X account, Eric and I like to do these live streams on occasion and just hash out the issue of the day. So happy Sunday. Hope y'all are having a good Sunday. And we're just going to chat about a couple of different things, primarily how citizens can engage in their civic duty, how you can get involved and help be the change in your local area on a state level or even on a national level. We're going to talk about what's going on in Washington state with the anti-family, anti-parent, anti-child movement of the radical left there. There was a rally this weekend put on by the Washington Republican Party in Olympia. It was a typical February winter day, raining and gray skies. I saw lots of umbrellas, and Eric attended the rally. And I know probably you may have seen some videos and photos circulating on social media. So Eric, tell us about how things went and any fun people that you met yesterday.
Yeah. Well, first, glad to be here on this Sunday. Still a little better weather than yesterday. It was pretty good. I got to say, it was sort of a typical Washington weather day. So we had to fight through that initially to get to sort of stay motivated and going. But I think when we got there and everybody sort of coalesced on the steps of the legislative building right there in front, and they had a number of speakers. Most notably would be like Jim Walsh, Brandy Cruz, John Curley, and Travis Couture. I think there was a couple other people. I think a guy from Yakima. I forget the gentleman's name, but he's a mayor.
Yeah, Matt Brown.
Maybe that rings a bell. And they went through sort of their speeches. They'd obviously had some stuff prepared, and they were sort of trying to piggyback on what had happened the week previously and sort of the ongoing discussion about the Democrats' legislative bills seeking to amend an initiative. And it was difficult to hear at times, and we had the rain and the cold, and like you said, lots of umbrellas. But I think all in all, the people that show up had a good rally for the most part. There was a couple of notable sort of Twitter personalities. Native Patriot was there. I think there was a number of people who actually came up to me and were like, "Hey, I know who you are," and so that was kind of cool to get to shake people's hands and sort of connect with them on a level that wasn't just through social media, but also in the real world. I think all in all, a good time was had. It's a bummer we had our typical February weather, but that's what we got in Washington for the legislative session. So we pushed through it, made it work. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, in Washington, you really don't have much choice during the legislative session, which runs January through April, or in a short year, January through the beginning of March. You're really stuck with the winter weather, early spring weather. And so you just have to, the left, they do not stay home in the inclement weather. And so it'd be good if our side could match that and come out and do the same. So I'm glad to hear. How many people would you say were there?
I would, I'm not the best estimator because I'm not a regular rally attendee at the Capitol, but if I kind of did a quick sort of estimation and then sort of looked at it visually, it looked anywhere from 200 to 300 people maybe would have been my guess. Nice. So it wasn't super bad. Or, there was quite a few people there, and they were all kind of squeezed in too, right down there at the bottom. So it was hard for me to get a full count, obviously. But I would say 200 would be a reasonable count estimation. I think most people had a good time. There's a couple of people that sort of had some counter protest signs. It was respectful. Nobody bothered them. They did their thing, and it was pretty comfortable. Honestly, it was good to see.
Nice.
Um, the one thing I wish they would have done better was the audio. Probably would have been helpful. They had like the speaker, and it was down on the ground. And I think if they just either elevated it somehow, had it hanging up, or maybe somebody strong holding it up, that would be kind of tough. But maybe somehow elevating it, because it was kind of hard to stay engaged with these speakers when you can't hear. But they did a good job. Jim Walsh's voice obviously always carries no matter where he goes. So
Right.
he definitely sort of drew the crowd back in the moment he started speaking, which was pretty cool. It sort of reminded me of like going to the Trump rally. I was there. He sort of captivated people again, brought people back into listening. So that would be the one thing that I kind of was hoping they maybe change in the future if they do this. And then with the umbrellas and stuff, it sort of interrupted the sight line. So if we could get them elevated up on that soapbox would be cool. But
and I mentioned this to you on X, but when we did we didn't do a rally, we did a protest in April of 2023. Right before the governor was to sign Senate Bill 5599 into law. And we did ours on the same, on the legislative building steps. And then across the courtyard, there was a counter protest with the Trantifa people and all the Democrat legislators. And what they did was they had the speaker on the steps speaking down to the audience. And I think that probably is a better use of sound. Plus what it did in that instance is it projected their sound towards our event, right? Because instead of projecting at the building, it was projecting out across the courtyard over towards our way, which was smart. They're very smart. We should take a lot of hints from them. We could learn a few things from them, doing them though in for good, not evil. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're definitely effective. I mean, at least in capturing and sort of getting that dramatic rally effect going on. One thing I kind of look at is sort of going back to my experience going to like the Trump rally. Is it was electric when I went to it. This was at PNC Arena in Pittsburgh when I went. And it was indoors, and so that's good. It makes for a more comfortable environment. But it was like a sports event, and they were really doing their best to sort of generate that electric mood. And obviously, there's a different political makeup from Western Pennsylvania to where we're at in Western Washington and Olympia. But I think there was the way they did it and sort of getting some of the crowd pumped up and having good audio and music and stuff like that did a great job, sort of like what you're describing with the counter protesters at your protest, of sort of overtaking the space and making sure it was dramatic and full of life and things like that. So you're absolutely right. We could for greater effect, there's a lot of things we could cue in on from these people that do it really well, and then apply it to the things we do. I mean,
right.
There's nothing wrong with copying a good strategy if it's effective and for good, like you said. So
right. Yeah, and as you know, and I've just been this way for forever. And I mean, since I got kind of involved in politics, I've never been I don't know what the word to say. I've never been part of the party or in the political organization. So it's funny that I have, people look at this and it's considered a political organization, which I guess it must be. I wouldn't know what else to call it. But, I think for me, like that never interested me going to like being part of the Snohomish County GOP or being part of the Republican Women's Club. Nothing against anybody that does that. It just was like, that's not really something I'm interested in. Right. But then, and I'm still I'm still more of just an independent minded person, right? I just want to go off and do my own thing. I'm pretty introverted, which when I say that kind of shocks people, but I'm very introverted. um, and so I just like to, march to the beat of my own drum and do my own thing. And, if people want to take a cue from what I'm doing, that's cool. Come on along. But I'm more of a one-on-one kind of person than doing sort of the group club events, things like that. So the whole rally thing never really grabbed me too much. Even when Trump came to because he came to Washington a couple times when he was running in 2016. He went to Spokane and then he went to Everett. And I happened to be in Spokane next door when I was working at a bodybuilding event and he was doing a rally in Spokane right after he announced it was 2015. But so I'm not like, I see rallies as being entertainment, fun time to get people together. And that is, right. You got to get people jazzed up. You've got to get people excited and motivated. And one of the things that I heard from you, and I've seen a number of comments on X, and this is just common with, I think, many rallies, is that I went and I heard all these speakers and it was great, but what do I do? Right? There's a problem and it needs to be fixed. And what can I do about it? And so that was why you and I decided to go live today to give people some ideas of things they can do, because you and I are just regular citizens who got engaged in the process and became citizen activists. I think, I was thinking back earlier today when, we had COVID and we heard all the time that there's going to be a new normal, right? And I think for both you and I, we got engaged in legislative action, testifying in the state legislature during that time, during the COVID era, right? And it didn't end when Governor Inslee, relinquished his emergency powers. For you and I, that became our new normal. We were testifiers in the legislature. That's what we did. And I know that you still do that. So that this has become our new normal. And I think a lot of people simply moved on, right? Like the crisis is over and let's move on. And it's maybe not hearing about it every day, or there's so many other issues that it's hard to keep track of things. And when you're locked down, of course, things seem more urgent maybe than they do now. And one of the things that I would like to see is more people getting engaged and taking action, right? You see people, speaking out on social media, it's great to see people, because 5 years ago, I think conservatives were kind of in the closet and quiet, and now they're speaking out, which is great. How do we get people to go one step further and go testify in the legislature, attend school board meetings, attend city council meetings, send emails, that kind of thing?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean,
that is the question.
That's like, because for me, and I think for a lot of people, I think in our discussions, you could probably relate to this. It took something immediate hurting us and hurting people we cared about, like to really bring it to our front door and say, look, you better start doing something now, or it's going to get worse than it already is. And, you don't even know. And then you start digging a little bit, and then you start to realize just how bad it really is. And so while you're sitting here trying to plug the dam, with your finger, and you realize there's a hole right there, I'm going to plug it. And then another one pops up over here, and then another one and another one. And then before you know it, you realize that this dam is so chock full of holes that you can't stop anymore. Like, you don't get the luxury of walking away. You don't have that ability to just let it, this trickle happen. This is going to destroy a lot of people's lives. For some people with COVID, I think that brought that view in, but then as soon as COVID left, and it's like, oh, well, I guess we're back to normal now. And like you said, it's the new normal.
Right.
For those of us who've been affected in other ways, like through sort of what's happened with the schools, through the parental alienation laws that have been built upon in the state that ensure that sort of you and I don't get input on that, people don't realize the impact on that until it really comes to their front door.
Right.
How do we get them activated? And that's the question. Oh, sorry. We've got to make them understand, or at least try and get them to understand the impact is not just on your life. It's not just me and Julie whose lives here now. We have freedoms. We have luxuries that we, maybe take for granted. But what we're fighting for now is actually the future, for our children's ability to parent, for our children's ability to influence their public school systems and to guide them through their ethical and moral dilemmas of life. What we're fighting for is not our own comfort anymore. It's our children's future. And like so many things, as far as laws go, once we start to understand the impact it has on the future, on our children, the real goal in life, in my opinion, once we start to understand that impact, then it will get people activated. Spending that time, when we're sitting in a committee hearing for 2 hours listening to drivel just to speak up for 60 seconds,
Right.
That's because we're vested into it emotionally and mentally and ethically. And with every fiber of our being, we understand that we have to fight this no matter how small of a fight we get to fight. People need to start getting used to that and understanding that and sort of getting into that pattern of behavior where it's like every little fight has to happen now. You can't relent. You can't back down. You've got to engage it every chance you can get. But if you're sitting at home comfortable and you want to go out and socialize and go do other things in your life, it's hard to bridge that gap. I think if we can set examples of going to school boards, and getting people locally into that, I think that's going to be critical. At least then you can exact real change. Whereas like with testifying in the legislature, our single voice or a suggestion I might make is going to fall on deaf ears. But if I go to my local school board, well, now I get to engage with an actual member of the community who may actually listen to what I have to say, who is, when I invest my time and effort into talking with them, they're going to go ahead and change some policy and influence thing. And that once people start to see those small wins, and they're going to start small, we're going to be able to get more people on board with it. And it's already happening. You already see some changes in school boards around the state, I think, with this last election. Yep. It's sort of clouded by the governor's race and the legislative session, but there's probably a lot of good things going on around the state at a local level that people can engage in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, the Trump administration is doing some really good things through the Department of Education. With there was a letter that came out from the DOE on DEI. You have the executive order that came out on Title IX. And those are things that citizens can go to their school board and tell their school board directors, hey, here's what here's what the administration, I think try to leave the word Trump out of it, because I think people in Washington are so triggered when you say that word. But just say, the Department of Education has come out with this letter because school districts can lose their funding independently of the state. So, Seattle School District could lose their federal funding, but Edmond School District school board might adopt the policies, get rid of the DEI, and then be able to keep their federal funding. So it's not just something that's going to apply to every school in the state. It's going to be at the district level. And it's important. And this is what some of the school boards in Washington state understand, is that they have the constitutional authority to make the policies for their school district, even though Washington state legislature is trying to mandate, all this crap into all these schools. You have some strong school boards that are pushing back against that. Now, if they have citizens and parents, taxpayers, because even if you don't have kids in the school district, if you live in the school district, you can be a voice at the school board. You're a taxpayer, you can go and speak up. If they have the pressure from the people in their district, it's going to move the needle. If nobody shows up, which typically at a school board meeting, maybe one or two people shows up. And usually it's not the conservatives. It's usually the left, the people on the left that show up. And so if nobody shows up, where's the pressure to change?
Yeah. I can testify to that.
What's that?
I said I can testify from what I've seen at the school board meetings.
Me too.
Not to say I'm the greatest about it, but yeah.
Yeah,
it's a missed opportunity every time.
Yeah, and when I went in, I was in North Shore School District, and every time I went, me and like one other person, unless there was some hot topic that everybody was mad about, then everybody would show up. But on just a regular school board meeting, not many people are there, and that's a perfect opportunity to speak out. And all of that stuff is recorded, so then you can record you can go to YouTube or wherever they keep their videos, and download your public comment and then spread it like wildfire on social media. The other important thing about the school boards is this, and I'm sorry, I hate the word parental rights because I think it sounds like it's about me rather than like it's a child's right to have their parent involved. It's a child's right to have the protection of their parent. But the initiative and the bills that they are doing to repeal the initiative, that is a very specific initiative to public education. So everything that's outlined in the initiative only applies to a child's public school records and public school notifications. So, if you take your kid to the doctor, that 2081 does not apply at the doctor's office. It does not apply outside of the school district. And one thing I think a lot of people don't know is that the medical clinics that are in the schools or that collaborate with the schools are separate from the school. So that medical record is not part of the child's school record.
Yeah, people don't understand quite, I don't think, where we're at, what the effect of 2081 does, and what the effect of these new SB 5081 and House Bill 1296 sort of have.
Yeah.
It's one of those missed opportunities, like at the rally, I think that people that were missing. It is a missing opportunity is when you get those people together, they're being engaged, but sometimes they may even misunderstand sort of what's going on. And one of the observations with my son and I, when we were talking about it, is when we walked away, what did we have other than sort of this memory about sort of being cold and going to this and hearing some speakers, which was awesome, but also not hearing some speakers, which is sort of a bummer. But at the end, we didn't have anything actionable to come out of there with. And one of my thoughts was, hey, let's use that opportunity to get some people some information about what it exactly is. And then they can take that home, plant the seeds in their communities of the discussion over why 2081 was necessary and what still needs to be done. Like you said, with the youth behavioral health care laws, and sort of start cultivating that energy by centralizing it in these discussion areas, like the rally, or like we're doing here today, or like at your school board, discussing that in public out there and getting 5 or 6 people all together to go and all speak out at the same time can probably exact quite a bit of change if done so correctly. And I think, back to the rally, it was just a missed opportunity to give people a little pamphlet, say, here's what's going on, and here's why you should consider this, and here's why you should care about this continually.
Was there any because all of the 5181 has passed out of the Senate, so now it moves over to, I think it's already been introduced in the House, and it's not scheduled for a hearing yet, I don't think. But It's passed out of the Senate. 1296 awaits a vote of the floor. And then once it passes out of the House, if it does, it would go over to the Senate. Was there any, did anybody speak to how citizens can engage in the legislative process with these bills as they move forward? Did anybody say, hey, you guys come fill the chamber when 1296 is up for a floor vote?
Yeah, they did. Jim Walsh, I think particularly, he brought that to point. He said, look, you got to show up, you got to speak out, you got to make sure you're listening to your action items when they come in and you get them, you know, you the emails or the letters, and make sure you sign in con. They definitely, there was definitely mention of that. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear all the speakers. So he was the only one who I can say for sure mentioned that. But it was definitely a theme. I don't know. You know, I wonder if it really resonates with the crowd as to what the actual effect of that is, you know. As you and I both know, it can be a fruitless endeavor. That doesn't make it any less necessary, just that some people will choose to use their time elsewhere because maybe they realize that. I don't know if it was articulated correctly how important it was that those things happen.
And you make a good point, because when you tell people, like when I try to encourage people to get active in the legislature, and you have to say, well, it's a battle that you're going to lose, but you still have to go to battle. And so who wants to do that, right? Like, who wants to sign up to go to war knowing that they're going to die, right? I mean,
Right.
obviously you're not going to die, but it's, you know, like you and I know, every time we testify, we know they're going to tune us out, and we know they're going to do what they want to do anyway. But we have to do it, because if we don't do it, how does it ever start shifting back the other way? And we just kind of, I think you and I probably both go into this hoping that there will be, you know, some, like, this thing will snowball and pretty soon more citizens will start showing up to testify. I personally haven't seen that. And, I don't know about you, but even this session, as I watch, I don't see that. We've had a hard time getting citizens to testify. I think that's for a number of reasons. Like, it's daunting in a place like Washington to put your name out there, put your name on the public record. People don't like to speak, don't like public speaking, or it makes them nervous, or, you know, we could probably list, 20 reasons why people don't want to testify, but it is an important place. And hopefully that's why, you know, we kind of wanted to talk about the idea of people going to school board meetings, because maybe that's less daunting, and maybe that's somewhere that you could work with other people in your community to get a win for your school board. And we have to, this is another thing people need to understand, is we have to do incremental wins, right? Like, we're not going to just like flip a switch and everything's going to be different tomorrow. You know, it's going to take a long time, inch by inch, getting things to, you know, a place of some sort of sanity.
But getting used to that process, getting geared up to do it, is going to be critical. Just probably like with any exercise, you know, you can't expect to be the top achiever in whatever that is. You
Right.
have to start small so you don't hurt yourself, get comfortable with the process, and learn and develop technique to be successful in the long run. I want to say, I don't know that because I haven't watched as much testimony this year as I did last year's session or the year before. I've had so much going on in my other personal life. But I will say this, I definitely sense through some of my other emails and engagement with other activists, there is, and I think even through the media, sort of what's being projected on X and through mainstream media, there's more attention being brought, in my opinion, to the legislative process itself. So I think that's part of the effect, whether it's with Conservative Ladies of Washington getting better at disseminating their information and digesting and then getting it out to people so that they can be more equipped to deliver on an action item, or just your local party sort of committees getting together and getting out action items themselves. I think there's been an increase in effectiveness in that way. Now, I don't know what the testimony is like, but I think there is that we're developing our toolkit today. And it started several years ago, and I think it's
Right.
starting to work. So that delayed response in getting people used to the testimony and getting used to speaking out, and in a lot of ways, getting into fights, getting fighting with yourself to get into that committee because you don't want to do it, and then going in and engaging and knowing that you're at odds with the people that are listening and the other surrounding audience members, and those little fights continuing to get used to that. I think we'll see more of that happening as people like you and I set the example. Or I think there's been a few people on X I've noticed that have sort of taken over too and are starting to testify. So I don't know if the numbers are there yet, but I think they're getting the clue that that's one of the battlegrounds that needs to be fought. Not the only one. Like you said, there's your school board meetings, there's your local committee, county commissioners meetings, there's public utility district meetings. There's opportunities to engage in the public discourse that are missed. But I think that as we've developed, we're going to start seeing better engagement overall. People are going to get fed up, once the taxes, it'll start to hit their home. We've already tried to say, hey, let's do this before it gets to your front door. They're like, it's going to be fine. The judiciary is going to work it out, or the executive will,
Right.
it'll figure that out. But as they notice it coming closer and closer to their front door, I think we'll start to see more and more engagements. Unfortunate that it had to wait that long, but I think we'll start to see it.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is, when you said people are starting to get fed up, I'm like, they're just starting.
Yeah, right.
Right. Because I said this to you earlier is, I've seen on social media, posts about, it's time for, us to fight for parental rights. And I'm just over here going, it's been time. This fight's been going on for, a long time. And even before you and I got involved, Eric, I mean, I've looked at, testimony from 2018, 2019 of people in Washington state who are fighting against, some of these gender inclusive schools policy and the comprehensive sexual education. And they're still doing it today. So, it's like this fight has been going on for many, many years. It's just getting to a point where it's so bad, you can't ignore it. And so for people that are seeing how bad things are, not just in education and anti-family stuff, it's with taxes, it's with, and it's stupid little garbage bills like, a committee to redesign the state flag. Like, really? we have plenty of problems besides, a new woke Washington flag. But all the way up to, they are expanding the shield law that allows kids to be trafficked into Washington state for abortion and so-called transgender care. Sorry, I'm going to go off on a little tangent because this made me so mad. I watched the committee hearing and I watched Senator Drew Hansen present this bill last week. I think it was early last week, like Tuesday, I think. And he said, we passed, I think he was in the House when they passed 1469. And he said like 3 different times while he was presenting the bill, how 1469 passed with bipartisan support. It's just like a knife. I'm like, oh my goodness. And here we are going to expand on that. I mean, there's so many bad things that most people, like, if you're not geeking out on this stuff, like you and I are, you hear about the things that make it into articles in the Seattle Times or the Center Square or whatever, wherever. But it's just this is what I said to to Big Mike on KVI when I was on Wednesday. I said it is a fire hose of communist garbage. And it is. It's like,
Yeah.
and they're going to pass hundreds and hundreds of bad bills again this year. At what point do citizens step in the ring and start doing something, whether it's go to a city council meeting, email? You don't even have to go to the meeting. Send them an email, find out what's going on and email them your thoughts. You can Google, let's say you live in Mill Creek City Council, Google it. You'll be able to find their meeting schedule. You'll be able to find their agendas, see what they're talking about, see what they're doing, and then email them your thoughts, tell your neighbors. My dad's 84 and he's always telling me about, he's sharing the CLW emails with all his neighbors, which is great. But he's also sharing like Snohomish County Council stuff. And, there's some land development stuff. And so he shares that out to all his neighbors. And, there's easy things like that you don't even have to leave your computer. That's helping.
Yeah. And it gets you used to the process. And
right.
I think for a lot of people, it's daunting getting into that entry. What do I do? It's intimidating. And if you start at these local levels, like your school board or your county commissioners meeting and all that stuff, I mean, those are small things. You don't even have to be super articulate. You just have to give your opinion about it. Even if it's a positive thing, it gets you used to those things, and it helps to develop your own understanding of your role in the public stewardship. I really don't know, and this is something that's been sort of plaguing me over the past 4 or 5 years, because I noticed that like the older generation, sort of the baby boomer generation, they're more engaged in understanding of the process. I think they're starting to migrate out of it, and that's what we're starting to see is as they migrate out, it's creating a void that's being filled by other people on the left, more specifically than on the right. And I think if we just get people to show up from the sort of conservative side to fill that void in a lot of ways, we will see change just by that nature of us being a part of it. But we're not showing up. Our generation, the Gen X generation, I think is leaving a void that we shouldn't be. I know a lot of friends and people, parents, people engaged in the public schools, they're busy paying their bills and making their lives and stuff like that, but they're not developing that time necessary to take stewardship on in their communities. One of the things, like I said, that I've been sort of trying to figure out is how to get that across to people that we need to start doing this because other people are doing it. Our generation, sort of the conservative side of that, Generation X, is not represented going into the future. I think there's a lot of people. We're dependent right now on the baby boomer generation to do this for us, but they're on their way out and we are not replacing them. And right now is the critical point where we need to start stepping up to the plate. We need to start learning how to do this from the baby boomers who are going to be displacing. And so that void isn't filled by only the left-leaning, the communist fire hose of our state. I think the country has sort of gotten wise to that in a lot of ways, but for some reason, Washington, we're not filling that role. Some of us are. I think it's possible, but it's just we're not sort of stepping up to there. I think we get a lot of good representatives who've sort of stepped up. Matt Marshall is one of those I really think is a positive step at the state level. And we can really understand kind of where he's coming from. Maybe that doesn't apply across the state, but that's a good thing to look at. That's a positive step for our generation to sort of become into the fold.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of other, but you look at, like, for instance, like your the flag redesign bill. That's a great one because that one is what was brought about by Greg Nance, who's I think a sort of a millennial generation. He's in the Bremerton area or Kitsap County.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like, that's the little things that we should be in taking part on. But we're not. It sort of seems insignificant, or maybe we don't care. But those are the things that they are taking part in.
Well, and Brad Clippert, when he was in the legislature, this is something he taught me, is when there's a bill that's for developing a committee or a task force or a work group, a citizen in their testimony can say, I oppose this bill or blah, blah, whatever your testimony is. If you do create this committee, I would like to be considered to be on this committee. So you can say that, which, that's another thing, is you look at a flag redesign committee, who's going to be on the committee? Well, you and I both know who's going to be on the committee, but imagine if conservatives stepped up and applied to be on the committee or emailed, whomever to be on the committee. Then we're going to have a voice in that. And just want to throw out there, just because I think a lot of people don't have all of the information about that bill. If there was a flag that was redesigned, it would go to a vote of the people. It doesn't, the committee doesn't just make a new flag and it, changes. So it does have to get voted. So
yeah, that's a good point. I did read that at the bottom. It's like, okay, it's got to go pushed out to the people. It's like, you can at least breathe a sigh of relief, whether or not the collective democratic political discourse will support it. We'll see. I kind of think they probably would, but yeah, that's one of those bills. It's a sort of a distraction in my mind. I mean, I don't think it's not important. Like, I think we should just keep our flag, but at the same time, that's one of those bills that's placed in front of you because it's shiny. It's like, oh, look at this. While we're over here, changing the definition of a major act from 1990, so it changes the entire way it's applied to the tax services or something like that.
Right. Well,
there's so much.
It's funny. I saw the Senate Republicans put out information on the flag bill, which it's a House bill, so I'm not sure why the Senate put it out. But anyway, and then I was thinking, did they put out any information on the SHIELD law bill? Because that's a Senate bill that had a hearing and executive session last week. So I searched their X feed, and they did not put out anything about expanding the SHIELD law. And that's just one small example, but it's almost like engagement farming, right? Like, ooh, we know we can get people all, clicky on this flag redesign, but do people really want to talk about a SHIELD law? Then we have to explain what a SHIELD law is, and it's just easier to. So my little nitpickiness, but those are important things that most people don't know about.
Yeah, I'll have to look at this SHIELD law and how it expands. Shoot me over that so I can check it out.
Yeah, I will. I did a video on it. I've done a couple videos on it because it ties to the sovereignty bill. Have you seen that one?
Which one?
I think it's 5688, maybe.
Let me look it up. Concerning federal orders that violate the United States Constitution, Washington Constitution, or judicial president, Hasegawa, Frame, and Nobles.
Yeah,
I
that's
haven't
it.
seen it.
And then so that bill, and then House Bill 1321, which is regarding the governor's authority over militias from out of state, and then the SHIELD law. You have a number of different bills that kind of build this blue state firewall in Washington to shield it from, the big bad Trump administration, which is kind of like what you've seen states like Florida, Idaho, Texas do when Biden was in, right? Like they made laws to protect their citizens from the federal government overreach. But the problem is the way that the Democrats in Washington and most other blue states interpret the Constitution is much different than the way you and I interpret the Constitution.
Yeah. And they'll interpret it according to the situation. And then the other situation, it'll be completely different.
Right.
Well, there's no doubt about it that Washington State and the West Coast sort of is trying to stand alone outside the envelope of the federal government because they don't agree with it.
Right.
But far be it from me to opine on that. But yeah, I think we all know that that's a very dangerous, and a lot of people that probably, if they really thought about it, wouldn't want that either. But
Right.
there's like you said with the bringing up Trump anytime they connect the word Trump, there's just like this stigma
Right.
that comes up in the
Right.
state of Washington.
And even people who aren't like far left, just, maybe they consider themselves moderate Democrats, they still don't like Trump. And so they have that, Trump derangement syndrome. So it's just kind of, if you can find other ways to phrase things rather, if you can say the Department of Education or the Department of Justice rather than the Trump administration, maybe it will help, not shut off people's listening when you say the word Trump.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because it kind of, a thought occurred to me yesterday at the rally, sort of along those lines, about how we get our message across effectively to people who don't care as much as we do necessarily, bridging that gap, making sure it's delivered correctly. I was listening to people talk in the crowd and things like that, and they say a lot of things that I agree with, but it's easy for me to agree with as a conservative who's standing here at this rally, and I drove an hour and 45 minutes away. So I want to be a part of this message, you could say, in a lot of ways. But if we're trying to get other people who sort of have trepidation about entering into the conversation of politics or legislature at all, then we need to make them comfortable by getting them in there, giving them the right things to talk about so that they're not misinterpreting sort of what this rally was about or what the effect of I-2081 was or why it's important we push back against 1296, giving people good education about these bills so that when they go out into the community and talk about them is critical,
Right.
I mean, we can all say what we want about, how transgender this and sort of LGBTQ about that, but it turns people's brains off when you start to talk like that a lot of
Yep.
times. And
Yep.
so rather than approach it, like you said, parental rights, not using those language, instead use other things. People need that information so that they can use it when they're talking to their community members or their school boards or
Right.
whoever, but we didn't really get that. I think there's a lot of opportunities at these places like the Democrats do. Okay. They remember earlier in the year when they released that sort of that primer about how we're going to discuss things
Right.
in the legislature. We're going to use
Right.
this term, but we're not going to use this term. We need to do that same thing.
Yep.
Whether we like it or not. I mean, I want to be able to talk how I want, and I'm going to when it comes down to it. But if we're trying to essentially sell something, a product to somebody who may or may not be interested, we need to meet them halfway. And it's unfortunate because you want to just say, yeah, we should just be able to talk however we want. I believe in that, but it doesn't work with everybody, especially in some place like Washington where there's just this brick wall anytime you try and discuss a conservative value or something that might be construed as conservative value. It's not even a
That's why
Republican
you have
thing.
to think of it like marketing, right?
Yep.
Like you have to have you're marketing this policy or this idea. And, going back to the parents' rights, if you listen to the Democrats talk about repealing 2081, whenever they're debating it or presenting their bill on it, they talk about children. It's about the child, and children need to be protected. Obviously from their standpoint, it's children need to be protected from their parents. And so we need to come at it the same way. My child has a right to be protected by me. Right? Like my child has a right to talk to me about big decisions in their life. And my daughter, we've had a lot of conversations about everything that she's been through because, I'm not going to go into our story, but this started with her in Washington State when she was just 14 years old. And one of the things she was saying to me a couple weeks ago is she was often in these crisis situations, and the people, whether they were in the hospital or in the school or in the youth shelter or what, social workers or whatever, they would say, what do you want to do about this? You're 14, so you get to make this decision. And she said they were encouraging me to make decisions that I wasn't mature enough to make. And I didn't know how they were going to impact my life long term. And now at 18, with a lot of the struggles that she has, she's able to look back on the last 4 years and say, gosh, if they had to call my mom and my mom made that decision for me, my life would look very different today.
Right.
And it's, I think if we can, a lot of parents don't have that specific experience. Most parents don't have that specific experience to draw from. But as I talked to her about that, I would phrase, I would go back into my testimonies over the last 3 years on every parental rights bill that I testified on and make it more about her. I mean, it was always about her, but she had a right, and the state of Washington took that away from her. And that will, she's a tough kiddo. She will overcome it. She's resilient, but it's not going to be easy. Her life is not easy. She is 18 years old. She's dropped out of high school. She doesn't have a GED. She's jobless. And so there's a lot of hurdles for her to jump over. And, 4 years ago, if mom had been able to make some of these decisions, is your son there? Hi, son.
Yes, he's here. Yes, water the chickens, please.
Good hair guy.
Sorry.
No. So, I think that if we can start reframing our messaging to how this is going to impact the children, and that children, this is harmful to children. It's not about me. It's about my kid, and you harmed my kid.
Right.
And it's time to say no more to these evil Democrats for harming these kids, and they do it in so many different ways. And our way is kind of, extreme, but, even going to school and where they will socially transition kids, calling them, a different name and different genders. That's really confusing to kids, because then they have to go home and pretend like, answer by their real name at home. And, so they're kind of living like two different lives. That's really messing with a kid's mind.
Yeah.
So sorry, I kind of went on a little tangent there, but.
No, that's an important, I think you make a good point about that marketing. And so, because getting conservatives to talk about it and even look at it from a different point of view. It's not about me, like you said, it's not about you, the mother here. This is about our children and their right to be represented, and for parents to be advocates for them, not just some state person who's only known them for a handful of hours, right, but a parent who watched them grow and has been there throughout their life. Our children have a right to not be alienated from us. And that's what's happening here. And you're absolutely right. Retooling it from a parent's rights, that doesn't sound quite right, but actually the children's right to have us as their advocates is the correct way to do. But yeah, again, we're right back to this point where we say, how do we convey that to people before it's too late? You stand here now because of the harm that's come to your daughter. I stand here now because of the harm that's come to my children, my life. How do we just want, and it's I think a pure, simple thing here. We just want to prevent this from happening to other families. We need your help to do that. Public, we're here to do that and stand with you and do what we can and share what we've learned. But in reality, we need you to stand with us so that we can prevent that.
And we're just regular citizens. We don't have any special training or certificate or education that allows us to do what we do. We just care a lot, and we want to make a difference. And so I just want to encourage people, you can start right now. You don't have to have anything, no requirements.
Yep.
If
Nobody
you are
needs
a
to elect
citizen
you.
of the United States and you care, you are qualified. So start speaking up, and hopefully we've given a few, at least put some ideas in your head this afternoon, this evening, depending on where you're listening from, that's hopefully encouraged you to get involved. And so please feel free to reach out to either of us. I know that Eric is also happy to talk to citizens who are looking to get engaged and just not really sure where to start. Both of us would be happy to chat with you and help figure out where the best place for you to plug in and help you figure out how to do that in your local community, or if you want to do it at a state level as well. We need people to engage in the fight, and you kind of just need to make it part of your routine, right? Like you have things that you do every week. Maybe you go to church, or you go to, whatever you do, put it on your schedule. I'm going to testify on one bill a week, or I'm going to go, we have a gal on our team that is in Mukilteo, and she goes to the Mukilteo City Council meetings every Monday night with some other people in her community. Maybe that's what you do. And maybe you can't go every week. Maybe you can only go once a month. Start somewhere. It doesn't have to, you don't have to start big. Start somewhere. So that's those are my parting words. You got anything to add to that?
I mean, that's pretty straightforward. It's, we need more people.
Yeah.
More people to be engaged. And you might have a key to doing this better. I think is one of the things I like to encourage people. Like, I started this, I just started doing it rough, and I've learned so much, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I look back and I cringe at some of the things that I've done or said it, as far as like, why would I do that? Or that was totally, but I learned a lot. And one of the things that I can do is maybe share what I have learned with somebody who is maybe going into this a little scared or intimidated. And I'm happy to do that. And you, as a new citizen or somebody who's maybe been doing it, whoever you are, may have a better way for me to do it. And I'm all ears, because the goal here is just to be successful.
Right.
I may be wrong. I may be making mistakes, but the goal here is to make sure we're successful and our children are successful and have good stewardship for their lives.
And that we leave something for them.
Yeah.
That there is a future for them, that they can have the same freedoms and opportunities that we have been so blessed to have.
Yeah.
That we've taken for granted.
Yeah. I'm happy if somebody wants to even get in touch with me and say, hey, go into this committee and testify with me. I'm all for that. I think there's something to be said there for comfort level. If you want to, I think even when sort of you and I started off, and then we sort of started orbiting around, that was a huge relief to know that you were standing there, or somebody else from CLW was in the same committee, and just to know that we're all sort of in alignment. Even if we didn't have the exact same message, at least we knew we were unified in that direction. And I'm here to do that with anybody who wants to take up the mantle. I can't do it for every single committee or every single bill at the moment, but get in touch with me, and I will happily sit and testify alongside you if that's what you want to do. Or if you got a meeting or something that I can make close by, happy to go. But that's what it's going to take. I understand that, because I've been harmed. My kids have been harmed. We know the fight, and we're here to stand with anybody who's willing to stand with us. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Well, thanks, Eric, for taking the time to do this. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And please do reach out to either of us at Mistral Comet, or you can find me also on X at Julie C. Barrett. You can also comment on the video if you're watching the replay. You can comment, or you can also find contact info on conservativeladiesofwa.com. So we will see you guys again next time. Thanks for joining us. Have a great Sunday night and enjoy your week ahead.
Thanks, Julie. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Eric.